Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe storms in the central United States for tomorrow and even for some of Wednesday as well. So we're going to be covering that, looking at when these storms will occur, and then we're going to be looking at what parameters are going to allow that. So we're going to take a look at the dew points, the temperatures, and all of that in today's video. So make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them down below and I'll be responding within a few hours of you posting that. So here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. We have some wind advisories in the lighter brown, so that covers some parts of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Montana, North Dakota, much of the West in general. We have some high wind warnings in that golden color for some parts of Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Texas, and New Mexico, as well as some high wind watches up for some parts of Montana, and then we have some red flag warnings in effect for parts of Colorado, Kansas, even a little bit of Nebraska, through the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas as well. We have winter storm warnings up for the higher elevations of California, and then we have some winter weather advisories in effect for some parts of Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado, and then we even have some winter storm watches up for a little bit of northeastern Nevada. We have some flood watches up for parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, with some wind advisories for Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And if I'm not mistaken, they might even have some high wind warnings up for southeastern Massachusetts, although I'm not 100% sure if that's the case. Now, yesterday we had a high temperature of 99 degrees in Zapata, Texas. The low temperature was 15 degrees, 13 miles north of White Springs, Montana. Highest rainfall report was in Salem Township, Missouri, which is in the northeastern part of the state. They got 4.34 inches of rain. And the highest snowfall report was in Colorado, 4 miles northwest of Mount Crested Butte, Colorado, where they got 4 inches of snowfall, and that's in the southwestern part of the state. So overall, it was a fairly busy weather day yesterday, and it looks like that trend is going to continue. If we look at the day 2 outlook for tomorrow, in terms of the severe weather risk, you can see that we have a enhanced risk up for some parts of south central Kansas, central Oklahoma, as well as for north central Texas. So basically, once you go from Dallas to Oklahoma City, and then you go north of there, you can pretty much draw a straight line, and anywhere west of there is pretty much within that enhanced risk of severe weather. So that's where we're looking at the strongest of the storms. I'm expecting them to be stronger, especially down in Oklahoma and Texas, more so than Kansas, although you guys will still definitely see some strong storms, especially earlier in the day on Tuesday. Then we have that slight risk which surrounds that as well, and then we even have that marginal risk in the dark green as well. Now, looking at the day 3 outlook, you can see that we have a slight risk up for some parts of southeastern Texas, southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and the coastal part of Alabama. And then we have a marginal risk which surrounds that. So it looks like this entire risk area is going to shift a little bit further to the south as we get into Wednesday. Let's start timing this out for you guys. You can see that we have on the NAM model some of these storms starting to fire up as we get into very early on Wednesday morning. Also, this would include Tuesday late at night, depending on which time zone you're in, whether you're in Mountain Time or Central Time. But you're looking at, in general, some thunderstorms in and around central Kansas and central Oklahoma. So this would be for late Tuesday night, but really for early Wednesday morning. Those do break up, so we're not dealing with anything too strong after that, especially in Kansas, but they really do start to heat up into southern Oklahoma and central Texas. So it looks like you guys in Kansas and northern Oklahoma especially might get your storms a little bit earlier in the day. By the time that we get into early Wednesday morning, it looks like you'll probably have most of the storms down into Oklahoma and Texas by that point. Now, if we move this on a little bit more, you can see those storms continuing to strengthen, and what's happening is that we have a low pressure system which is elongated over Kansas and Oklahoma. we have a cold front associated with that storm system right there, and that cold front is creating this V shape within these contours right here. So that's indicating that you do have a little bit of a line of instability, which is right in this area right here. So here's where that line of instability is, and you can tell that that kind of matches up perfectly with where your storms are actually setting up. So you're dealing with strong southerly winds out ahead of the system, and these strong southerly winds are allowing some of this moisture from the Gulf of Mexico to move further north, increasing the dew points, increasing the level of humidity, and increasing the temperatures, all of which are needed for severe weather. So overall, most of the ingredients are coming together by Wednesday morning. If we move this on to later in the morning hours of Wednesday, you can see that we still have some storms into eastern Oklahoma and eastern Texas. As we continue this forward a little bit more, this would be by early afternoon on Wednesday. And we have some of those storms into Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. So we're dealing with some amount of severe weather. I'm thinking that especially so in Texas and Oklahoma is where the bulk of the storms will be. Kansas, again, like I've said before, it looks like this is probably going to be more of a Tuesday later afternoon event for you guys, but it'll be more of a morning event on Wednesday if you live again in the southern plains. So it will be different depending on what part of the central United States you live in. Once you get further north, you will still have some rain, so areas like Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri will still have rain, although nothing that's going to be really convective or related to severe weather. So we're not really dealing with anything major into those areas. These storms continue to strengthen and move further to the east. So now by this point, they're even crossing over into Louisiana and Arkansas. This is Wednesday night, and you can see that that low pressure system has really taken a big dive to the south. So we have the original starting position, which was up here in Kansas, and now that's dived down into Louisiana by this point. So it's all the way over here. So your low pressure system has really taken a big dive further to the south, and along with that, all of the severe weather and all the severe storms are going to be moving a little bit further to the south and east as well. So we have to go over to a lower resolution model because the NAM 3cam, which is the high resolution one, only goes out 60 hours, and the NAM 12cam, which is the lower resolution model, goes out to, I believe, 84 hours. So we can go a little bit further out on this one, which is a good thing, I guess. You can see that we have some of those storms continuing to plow on to the east by very early on Thursday morning. The low pressure center is now starting to intensify a little bit, but because we're starting to already get into the third day of this severe weather event, you don't really have all the ingredients that are needed. They've already been used up into the central plains. So you are still dealing with some amount of southerly wind direction, but it's not as strong as what you were dealing with in the plains. And actually, you have more of a stronger westerly and northerly jet coming in on the west side of the low pressure center. So it's really being outperformed on the west side than on the east side, which means that you're not going to be able to get as much severe weather in that eastern part of the storm, which is typically where you get severe weather. You can basically draw a kind of a box around each low pressure system, and especially so in the winter. When you get into that southeastern corner right in here, this is where you're going to be most favorable for severe weather in most systems. In the wintertime, the northwestern sector of the storm is typically where you have the coldest air and also where you're normally getting some of the snow. The northeastern sector typically is where you're dealing with a lot of mixing, especially in the winter between ice and snow and rain, and the same applies for that southwestern sector, although that tends to be a little bit more on the warmer side as well. So there's a few different things. I like to especially do that little box method, or you can even draw a circle around and put a little pie chart right here, and that can give you a good idea of what to expect. It's really good, especially when you're getting kind of more into meteorology, to start off by doing simple things like that, just drawing a box around the low pressure center and then basing that off of your forecast. So just using each sector to make a different part of your forecast can be helpful, especially in complex systems that happen, especially in the wintertime. That can be a little bit harder to wrap your head around. So that's one technique that I learned earlier on to when I was following the weather, and it's really useful, especially in those bigger type of storms. Now, moving this on a little bit, it's going to start to slowly move to the east into the southeastern part of the U.S., but by this point, these storms are much weaker, so we're not dealing with anything too major. Now, let's take a look at the amount of shear, because I do think there is a fairly good chance of tornadoes and hail over some of these areas. You can see that we do have a good amount of bulk shear, right around 60 to 70 knots coming straight out of the south over to these areas. So that is right over the zone of severe weather in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So these areas dealing with a ton of shear. And if we were to look at the Storm Prediction Center's tornado outlook, which I don't have posted right here, but I did look at it before, and over this exact same area or over a very similar area, you were dealing with, I believe, a 10% risk or a 5% risk of severe weather, and it was mainly over this area. So they were doing it based off of most likely the amount of bulk shear, knowing that it's going to cut off once you get into eastern Kansas and eastern Oklahoma. So the sector of highest tornadic activity is really only going to be on the eastern side of the bulk shear. So you're going to have that area of potential tornado risk, I would say, right in here, and then it'll really drop off as you get further to the east. Now, if you look at the amount of CAPE, the gray color is 1,000 to 2,000, and then the yellow is 2,000 plus. So you can see that we do have enough ample CAPE for many of these areas in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So we're getting right around 1,500 joules per kilogram in most of these areas, which is definitely high enough to see some severe weather. And if we look at the temperatures I believe this would be actually for Tuesday, the high temperatures, you can see that we do have some temperatures that are going to be getting up into the 60s and 70s and even 80s as you get further to the south. Now, something that will help the severe weather is that we do have a little bit of natural instability. One of the things that's causing that is that we have a big temperature differential. So we're going from the 50s up into central Nebraska to the 70s into Colorado and Kansas. So this is at the height of the temperatures, but if you were to move this on to when the system is a little bit further to the east, you would see that some parts of central Kansas would warm up into the 60s to the mid 60s, and northern Nebraska would still be down into the 50s and 40s. So you will naturally have that little zone of instability, that area of less stability there, where you could be dealing with a little bit more severe weather than in the surrounding areas. So those temperature differentials and temperature differences will allow for more severe weather into areas like Kansas and in western Oklahoma. I think that's where the strongest of the storms will be. If we're looking at the more widespread storms, that's going to be into Texas and eastern Oklahoma. If we look at the dew points, we're looking at about 60 to 65. Again, highest dew points are of course going to be further to the south, where you're closer to the Gulf of Mexico, so you're closer to the area of moisture. But I think it is pretty impressive that by late October, we're still seeing dew points getting all the way up to 60, even into northern Kansas. So it does show you that we have a really decent setup right now. And if we look at the amount of precipitable water, this is basically showing you how much water is in the atmosphere at any one given point. And you can see that we have about 2-inch plus amounts, or actually that's 1.5-inch plus amounts for parts of Oklahoma and Texas. So again, heavier rainfall, that's going to be located further to the south because you're closer to the area or to the source of the moisture. But if you live up in Kansas, northern and western Oklahoma, northwestern Texas, again, you guys will still be dealing with severe weather, and I think more of that is going to come in the form of hail and possibly isolated tornadoes, rather than more of the flash flooding that you'll actually get with the storms down in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, southeastern Oklahoma. So again, two different sides of what's going to happen depending on where relative to the storm you will be. So this is going to be an interesting interesting one to track. I'm not sure if I'll make another video on the severe weather because, of course, the severe storms are going to take place tomorrow evening. So I'll have to see when I'm able to make that video. If I can make it earlier in the day, so right after I get home from school, then of course I'll do that. But if I'm a little bit more busy, then I'll probably just cover a different topic that's a little bit further out. Just because if I make a video at, let's say, 5:30 Eastern time and the severe weather is going to start at 7:30 Eastern time, and again, this is just hypothetical, but that only gives you 2 hours to really watch the video, and then the severe weather happens. I'd like to have a little bit more of a little bit more room for that than just 2 hours. So typically I like to make the video the day before, and you'll even see that in the wintertime in snowstorms. If it's already snowing, typically I'm not going to cover that unless it's one of those really big storms that goes cross country. Typically once it starts snowing, I stop covering it because I'm not a live channel. I don't go live here at all pretty much. I might do it maybe once or twice in the future, but for the most part I'm going to be forecasting 3 or 4 days in advance. So in terms of live coverage or anything that's going to be day to day, I'm really not going to be able to do that just because by the time people watch it, it might already be out of date. So that's one of the things I'm going to be kind of wrestling through, whether I'll make another video on this or not. It's all going to depend on when these storms actually start up. If they're already starting up by the time that I'm about to make the video, then I'll probably just hold off and make it on a different topic. So that's a little insight into what tomorrow's video might be about. That is going to wrap it up, and if you did enjoy it, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.